Hello, welcome back, Pouring Nation. Today we're going to talk about a question I get a lot, which is, can I pour over my acrylic pour? The quick answer is absolutely. There are a couple things you want to keep in mind when you do that, and we're going to go over that in just a second. For those of you that don't know me, my name's David. I've been acrylic pouring for a few years now, and I am not an artistic person, or at least I thought I wasn't. I am a computer technology guy by trade. That's what my 9-to-5 job is. However, I got into acrylic pouring because I'd seen it on Instagram and YouTube and it was captivating. And guess what? A right-brained guy like me can do it. And you can too. So we're going to talk today about pouring over an acrylic pour. Sometimes you just don't like the pour. So depending on where you are with your pour, will tell us what you can do with your acrylic pour. So first we're going to talk about a dried acrylic pour. Absolutely you can pour over a dried acrylic pour. I have a bunch here that I have painted that I didn't really like that I would want to pour over. There's a couple things you got to keep in mind. When you're pouring and you get things like cracks and crazes, you can kind of see I have crazes right there. Or you get dimples from oil, any kind of surface that you have that isn't flat, you're going to be able to see through the paint. So you need to be very careful about what paint is already on the pour. For silicone, if you have silicone like this did, if you still have it on there, you might want to clean it off before you re-pour. If you're going to be re-pouring the exact same colors and the exact same thing with silicone, it might not hurt to leave it, but generally you want to clean that off. You can do that with just a wet soapy paper towel. Some people do it with alcohol, some people do it with Windex. All of those things work, but you want to clean most of that stuff off so that your paint doesn't get... The whole idea of silicone is that it pushes paint away. And we don't want that on the surface of our canvas. Otherwise, you're going to get holes that go all the way to the canvas. So you can decide if you want that or not. This is another one where I dropped silicone on, and you can kind of see, especially right here, you can see the little stars of silicone. Those will absolutely show through if I pour over this. The second thing, if you've already poured, you just want to make sure it's clean. Clean it off with a damp rag, make sure it's there, let it dry, and then you can pour right over that. Or you can gesso and then pour right over that. Another thing that I've noticed is tiles. This is a tile that I didn't like. You can see that I poured on it. I just soaked it in water for a couple of hours and then pulled the paint right off. Cleaned it up. I'll have to pull the sides off a little bit more. And then you can pour right over it. This is another one that I poured. I actually used tape to demarcate this. So there's actually a lip right here. And you want to be very careful that that'll absolutely show through. So probably something like this I would just use for a test and then throw it away, just because that square is going to look funny. This one here is a perfect one to pour on. It has a nice flat surface. I didn't like what it looked like. Here's another one, a little 8x8 that I poured. I was trying a new swipe technique. It didn't work out, but it's nice and flat. There's no funny texture on it, so I'll just clean that off and re-pour on it. Now, if you've already finished, you've put a finish on top of your coat, like this. I put a nice glossy finish on top. I love this. I'm not going to re-pour on it, but I could clean this off and pour right on top of the finish. There's no problem there. Most finishes will accept a new pour, and the finish actually helps give you a nice clean surface. So there's no problem pouring over a finished painting. So here's my 8x8 that I said I was going to re-pour on. We're going to use some colors that I haven't really used, that I bought a long time ago and are just kind of taking up space. So they're not the prettiest colors together, but we're going to try. All right, so I poured these colors out. I hate this. I don't want to keep it. I've got a couple of options. As long as the paint hasn't dried, I haven't left it here for very long, I can just pour additional paint right on top. So those are some of the things that I can try and do to save a painting I don't like. I'm just pouring right on top of my previous pour. Maybe I don't like this at all. There is absolutely nothing wrong with just wiping that whole bit of paint off completely. Now you can either wait for that to dry, or in my case, I'm just going to pour immediately. And this is an 8x8, about 64 square inches. If I add up the sides, it makes it 82 square inches, I believe. So again, I could let it dry, or it's still wet here, I can just do a completely different pour. And there you have it. A brand new pour from a failed pour. When you're acrylic pouring, especially when you're a beginner, your pouring surfaces tend to be a little bit more expensive. So there's nothing wrong with pouring on this, letting it dry, pouring again. One caveat I will say is paint takes 2 or 3 days to dry to the touch, but it takes about 3 weeks or 4 weeks, maybe a little bit more if it's a big painting, to fully cure. That is for every single bit of the water to come out. You do not want to paint on a painting that has not fully cured yet. So if your paint has dried, make sure you wait 3, 4, 5 weeks before painting over it. Otherwise, some of the water that's inside the bottom surface may come up, and it may affect and potentially cause crazing and cracking on your painting. So definitely paint over your acrylic pours. Just make sure you do it correctly. If it's dry, make sure it's cured. Make sure you've cleaned it. Make sure if there's silicone on it, you've at least thought about that. And if you are okay with it being there, great. If not, you're cleaning it off with soapy water or alcohol. If your painting is wet, paint right over it. If you're not comfortable with that, scrape all the paint off and immediately paint, or scrape all the paint off, give it an hour or two to mostly dry, because you don't have very much paint on there anymore, and then paint on it. Hopefully this saved you some time, saves you a little bit of money. This is the type of content we do on this channel, so if it was helpful to you, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the little bell icon to get notified when we do our weekly videos, and enjoy pouring.